phones, Babylons can't crack the.
What it do, YouTube? B. Kelly back again with another banger. Today's video, I'm going to give my predictions for the FBS independent teams for college football 2020 season. The first team I'm going to talk about today is Notre Dame. I'm predicting an 11-1 record with Notre Dame. Now, I think they can beat Navy, Arkansas, Western Michigan, Wake Forest, Wisconsin, Stanford, Pitt, Duke, then lose to Clemson, and then I think they can beat Georgia Tech, Louisville, and USC. I personally think that's the best case scenario. I really don't see them beating Clemson at all, and the worst case scenario would be a 9-3 season in my opinion. I do think USC and Louisville could give them a battle, but I don't see those two teams beating them. So I'm going to give them an 11-1 record for this year. The next team I'm going to talk about is Army. Army kind of had a disappointing season last year, but they were a pretty young team, and they're going to be more experienced this upcoming season. Now, I think Army is going to bounce back from last year and be 9-3. I think they'll win their first game against Bucknell, then beat Rice, then lose to OU, then beat Miami, Princeton, Eastern Michigan, but then lose to Buffalo because Buffalo has a pretty good squad, and beat Air Force, beat Tulane, beat Umass, beat Uconn, and lose your final game with Navy at Financial Field, home of the Philadelphia Eagles. I would say the best case scenario for Army is an 11-1 season, and the worst case scenario would have to be an 8-4 season. The next team I'm going to talk about is Liberty. Now, I think Liberty will finish 7-5 on the season. I think they will lose their first game with Virginia Tech, but then bounce back and beat North Carolina A&T, beat Western Kentucky, and lose to FIU, beat Bowling Green, beat Louisiana Monroe, lose to Syracuse, lose to Southern Miss, but then bounce back beating Uconn, Western Carolina, but then lose to NC State and beat UMass in their final game. But that's probably the best case scenario for this team. I would say the worst case scenario for them would probably end up being 5-7 or 6-6, because I feel like the North Carolina A&T game could be a risky game. I mean, North Carolina A&T, they're actually a really talented ball club down there, and they're very good. And I could see them losing to Western Kentucky this upcoming season, just because Liberty did lose some key pieces to their team and offense, but they still have pretty good coaching. Next team I'm going to talk about today is BYU. Now, BYU is not a bad football team, but I'm predicting a 5-7 record because they have a very tough schedule. I have them losing to Utah, Michigan State, Arizona State, and Minnesota in the first 4 games of the season. But then I have them bouncing back, winning the next 4 games, beating Utah State, Mizzou, Houston, and Northern Illinois, but then losing to Boise State and San Diego State, then beating North Alabama and losing to Stanford. Now, the worst case scenario in this season would probably have to be, honestly, a 3-9 season, because the Mizzou and Houston games will be tough games in my mind, even the Utah State game, but Utah State lost their main guy in Jordan Love, so I think they can pull that one away. And I would say the best case scenario for this team would probably have to be 7-5 if they could get a win against Stanford and Michigan State. The next team I'm going to talk about is New Mexico State. Now, New Mexico State is a very bad football team. I think they're going to finish 2-10. I'm predicting they're going to lose to UCLA, UAB, Akron, New Mexico, but then finally get a win with UTEP, lose to Texas State, Hawaii, Fresno State, lose to Louisiana, then lose to UMass, but then beat Texas Southern. And then the final game of the season in Gainesville, Florida. Oh my god, they're going to get pummeled by them Florida Gators. They're going to get destroyed, demolished. I'm predicting a 2-10 record on the season. I would say best case scenario for them would be a 5-7 season. Possibly, actually no, change that, 6-6 season. If they could beat Akron, New Mexico, Texas State, UMass, and Texas Southern all in the same season, they could be 6-6, but I don't see it. I really see a 2-10 season. And honestly, worst case scenario would be 0-12, but I think they could get one win. I mean, UTEP's not a very good team either. I think that's a pretty much a guaranteed win for them. Next team I'm going to talk about is the Uconn Huskies. Now, Uconn, they're in a very bad situation. The football team is awful. The coaching isn't the best right now, and a bunch of players have been entering the transfer portal, and some of their best players too. Now, I don't see the season being very good for the Uconn Huskies. I see a 2-10 season. I have them beating Umass in their first game, but then losing to Illinois, Virginia, Indiana, Old Dominion. But then I have them beating Maine, but then the rest of the season is really bad, losing to Ole Miss, Liberty, North Carolina, San Jose State, Middle Tennessee, and Army. The final team I'm going to talk about is Umass. Now, Umass is a very bad football team. I'm predicting a 2-10 record, and the first game they play is at Uconn. I have them losing. Then I have them losing to Troy. I have them beating Albany. I have them losing to Appalachian State, New Mexico, Temple, Akron, FIU, but then finally beating New Mexico State. Losing to Auburn, Army, and Liberty to finish off the season. Now, worst case scenario I see is being 1-11. I think they can beat Albany, and I would say the best case scenario would be a 4-8 season. And that's a pretty good season for them, because a couple of years ago they had back-to-back 4-8 seasons. Well, guys, if you guys liked the video, remember to smash that like button, turn on them post notifications, and subscribe for more videos. B. Kelly out.